We know specifically college leads to better outcomes for kids and adults. The base rates are there. The costs have exploded. The complexity to get it done is higher than ever. How do you plan for this? Stay tuned. We're going to talk you through this. My name is Robinson. I'm a financial planner in Phoenix, Arizona.
My name is Gabe Kaplan. I'm a financial planner in New York. And today we're going to talk about the importance of education planning, some of the strategies we use to plan, how do we choose the schools and we estimate the cost, and finally, how do we create a savings plan in order to implement that educational plan. We know that college education, the cost is insane right now. We know it leads to a ton of challenges for families to pay for it. So the big question is, how do we prepare for college? Robinson, why do we think college is a good thing?
The base rates, the numbers on going to college versus not going to college for Americans are significant. So for anyone as a parent who wants the best for their kids, of course, I'm not saying college is for everybody or that college is the only way to end up with success. Everyone knows outliers, LeBron James, Bill Gates, whatever, who don't have college educations and do great. But for most people, college makes a big difference. You get higher lifetime earnings, you get more wealth accumulated, and you get better health outcomes. Now, correlation, causation, are people who are more well off already healthier for other reasons? Sure. Regardless, higher education is a positive force for your kids. If you're able to offer it to them, outcomes are really good. It's really that simple.
When you think about these outcomes, what are the key things that you're looking for? Like, how do you actually put that together into a financial plan?
I think of it as kind of a stack ranking exercise where we're taking these big, broad, long-term financial goals, which are retirement, taking care of yourselves, education, buying a house, these big pieces, and then slotting them in as priorities in different levels. Gabe, I know you have kind of a specific way that you like to think about the free cash flow.
Yeah, I take a very structured approach before tackling educational planning. So first, I would always look at the cash flows of someone's personal situation. Then the first thing I would do is okay, let's figure out retirement planning, because from a foundational perspective, if you think about it as a triangle, like a food pyramid, similar. The bottom part, the most important part, is retirement planning. You can take out a loan for college. You can take out a loan for buying a house. You can't take out a loan for your retirement. And so at the end of the day, that has to be something you have to self-fund. And so making sure that part is in a good place before you tackle education planning. Once you tackle that part, the rest becomes an order of priority. So let's figure out what education, your kid's education will cost. Let's figure out, what buying a house will maybe cost, if that's a priority for you. Let's figure out the timeline of those things. Can you actually, how much is the minimum amount you need in order to pay for a down payment? And then does college funding, based on whatever you put down for down payment, what is left for college planning? Is that enough for the goals that you have put in place for your kids? Is that how do you level that with your expectations? And so to me, there's always an order of going forward in terms of financial planning, and the order will determine then the amount that you can save for education planning. And once you've determined that, then let's look at, what that money can buy you.
I want to make a note on one thing here under financial goals, paying off debt. So if we're comparing education goals and paying off, let's say, high interest credit card debt or building an emergency fund, in my mind, there's almost no scenario in which you're funding long-term college education while accruing credit card debt or not having an adequate emergency fund. They're incongruent. You can't do that. You need these baseline financial health pieces. Go watch our other video on am I going to run out of money for more details on that particular piece.
Let's jump back. You're developing your educational plan, right? What are the steps in doing that? How do you tackle that with your clients?
Yeah, I like to think through a vision of what type of schools we might be planning for, because they really like what do you envision based on what you know about this kid and where you went to school, maybe your family legacy, maybe what grandparents and culturally what goes into school choices. There's a lot there, and family situations have a lot to it. If both parents went to Ivy League schools or expensive liberal arts colleges and had really foundational parts of their education there, it's likely that type of planning will be important to them. Others will say, no, we have really good in-state schools, and I expect my kids to maybe gravitate towards that. And if they're really high achieving, then maybe there's a reach school there. But those type of level settings really help you calculate future costs, because you can find current costs and extrapolate forward pretty easily with calculators or by yourself in Excel. So that's my first one. It's kind of level setting on our expectations around parents' vision for what do you think that this looks like as far as secondary education.
Let's say your kid doesn't know what he wants to study. Well, there's large variability, but if he knows he wants to be an engineer, well, that narrows more or less what the outcome is. If he finds a job, you know what the salary is, so then you can probably afford to go to a more expensive school in the long run, right? It isn't such a high paying job, so does it make sense to spend a lot of money on that education?
I think one takeaway from this phase one piece is it's really actually phase two about estimating the cost. So like when you're trying these on for size and you're doing calculators, the reason that we did this planning strategies piece first and talked about how much free cash flow or how much capital you may be able to contribute to an education plan and how far away that is, and use these calculator things, is because this is ultimately going to be a process of elimination, right? That's what we're talking about, is narrowing this choice, because there's so many college choices. There's so many places to look. But if you know that the 20 most expensive schools in the US there's absolutely no chance that your family can afford that. This process of elimination is really useful as we're looking at these broad choices and trying to get down to, hey, here's a few that work and here are the trade-offs between them.
Regarding exploring financial aid, it is one of the most important parts of education planning. It's very hard to look at financial aid when you're like 10 years away from it. It becomes way more important and applicable to each child, like once you're 1 or 2 years away. Preparing yourself for the FAFSA application is something that I highly recommend parents to do. Phase 3, choosing the school.
Yeah, this is highly personal. There is expert guidance you can get. I don't think I used expert guidance in choosing a school. Did you, Gabe?
No, I mean, I used
your gut and your family and what you knew.
Yeah, it's hard. A good college experience is a lot about luck, and luck with the people you surround yourself with. I think the choice that you have there is like large school or small school, and the different types of in-state, out-of-state. And then once you know those choices, it's hard to optimize.
Let's pop over to implementation, talk about actually getting this done from a savings perspective.
There's a couple of educational savings accounts that you can open to pay for education. But beyond that, there are also like some other regular accounts that you use just to save up the amount of money you need. Over time, there has been different ones. The Coverdell Education Savings Account is like an older one. The 529 is, I think, a more recent thing that showed up, and it's become the preferred one. So there's the 529, the college savings plan, and the prepaid plan, I believe. In this video, we're just going to talk about the savings plan. Like if you know the college you're going to go to already, then some of them offer prepaid plans.
It's a low number. It's under 25 colleges in the U.S. are in this program at present.
But it's good to research to see if the in-state college that you're going to go to may satisfies this requirement or like has this option, and then you might want to consider it. I just want to talk about first, there's like, when we evaluate these 5 different options to save money, there's you look at it from an operational perspective. How easy is it to set it up? How easy is it to manage? Then in an investment perspective, then from a tax point, is there any tax benefits for investing in these accounts? And then from a financial aid perspective, will this affect negatively the FAFSA application? to me, it's a slam dunk that the 529 college savings plan is like the best plan. Sure, it's not by like the best investments because you can't invest in single name stocks.
529s are similar to 401k plans where you're going to get a menu of investment options and have to select from those, and they're all going to be basically mutual funds.
Yeah, and so the big question is like which of those plans have index funds, specifically kind of like the Vanguard or some low cost index fund. And so at the end of the day, like what you want to find there is if that one has index funds, I'm okay with it. To me, that's a good investment flexibility. From an operational flexibility, like, okay, well, can I take out the money easily to pay for tuition? Do I have to worry about other things? And from a taxable, regular taxable account, there's nothing that hinders you from taking out the money. But now if you go into a Roth or traditional IRA, you have to start to worry about like the penalties or this and that. And so it becomes, problematic. You just have to understand the rules. From a college savings plan, if the goal is to pay for tuition, then it's a good, from an operational perspective, it's fine. And then within tax efficiency, is there any tax benefits from saving into this account? We all know the tax benefits from an IRA account and the Roth IRA account. We all know what the taxable ramifications are from a regular taxable account or a custodial account. But the 529 seems to be a better option here in some states, right? Some states will give you some benefits. Why don't you speak about the financial aid efficiency here?
This varies considerably. Basically, the 529 plan owned by parents or by grandparents with the college-bound student as a beneficiary is extremely efficient for FAFSA planning, all else equal compared to other assets that are held by parents, grandparents, etc. 529 is treated favorably, so it works best here.
Is it a little bit different if the parent and the grandparent owns it? I thought that if the grandparent owns it,
it's ideal if the grandparent owns it. I think that gets the absolute best treatment
from the FAFSA application, unless I think, but I think if they pay for it, that becomes income from the kid, and so then it becomes inefficient. So it's like use the grandparents the last year or the last 2 years of the education, use the parents the first 2 years. I think that's the rule. Do you want to talk a little bit about the investments? How do you match the investments with the time?
This depends completely on the 529 plan account that you choose. Dozens, if not hundreds of options. Rules will vary by state, whether or not you get a state tax benefit for choosing your state's 529, because technically each one of them is associated with a state, a U.S. state. The investments inside of it, you're going to have a menu of investments. Some are going to be totally hands-on, meaning you could select individual fund options that you think work for you. Other ones are going to have glide paths where, similar to a target date fund in a 401k or retirement plan, you can say a target enrollment date or already enrolled, currently withdrawing plan. These are going to basically match up your timeline with a risk tolerance. So for a very young child, you have a much higher risk tolerance. The volatility doesn't matter from age 3 to 12, hardly at all. From 12 to 18, it starts to matter a good bit more. And from 18 to 21, it matters a lot. Right? You don't want to take a ton of volatility while you're in withdrawal mode. So these plans will offer pretty hands-off ways for you to not have to manage that glide path. What we mean by glide path is, at the start, quite risky, trying to get a high rate of return, somewhere moderate, maybe in the middle, and some are quite conservative and income-driven when you're towards the end and actually withdrawing.
What else should we know about the 529s? What is special about them?
This second point here, I think, is the biggest one. I like to call this a release valve. So when we were funding 529s in the past, we could be worried about thinking, okay, this child, I think they're going to have an expensive educational goal. How are we going to react if they get a full scholarship and go in-state or don't go to college, and we have all these 529 assets tied up in this account that's specific to education planning? The ability for us to use this release valve and convert 35,000 of 529 assets per beneficiary to a Roth IRA is extremely powerful and gives parents an out for overachieving kids or kids who don't want to go to college or kids who are not sure that, they need the money for this, or kids who use a an education path that doesn't involve a list of schools that can use 529 plans, right? Like if you go to trade school at present, you can't use 529 plans to fund that. That may change, of course, but the point remains the same. You can translate 529 assets into long-term tax-efficient retirement assets to the tune of $35,000 per beneficiary starting in 2024. That's super, super powerful and super new. This was not a thing for, until, what was it, last year they passed this.
The last point here, the 529s pay for more than just tuition. They pay for room and board also, right? So, and books and qualified supplies and computers and stuff like that. Just be aware of that, because that's, that amount of money adds up eventually. FAFSA, let's talk about that. This is a little bit of touch point here.
This is a huge piece. I would say that the leading educational planner people in the space do recommend, even for high income and high net worth families, to fill out a FAFSA before college, because you'd be surprised at the amount of potential aid given and the changes this can make to a package that's offered to a student. It's a incredibly detailed and pretty long application that you want to start on a year plus before college starts. So I think the deadline is something like the October prior to when the school year might begin. So this is something to be thinking about early. But the third point here, EFC, I think it actually stands for expected family contribution. So that's the output of the FAFSA. You submit this big application and you get an EFC, expected financial contribution, meaning what the college thinks that the family should contribute based on where the family is financially, which is complicated. It's a lot. It's very involved.
And then from a summary perspective, college matters. Higher education matters, both for your lifetime earnings potential and also health-wise. It's important that you start to prep for college as soon as possible. Figure out also what are the best vehicles for saving. If you live, let's say, in California, is it the California 529? Is it some other states 529? And then also it might be a taxable brokerage account. And then finally, plan ahead. Make sure that you have a plan rather than nothing. We have some resources. This presentation will be available in the links down below. There are some resources and links that we'll also put in the description below. Like and subscribe if you can. It'd be really helpful. Thank you.